All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And the we have some very important aspects to cover today with respect to public safety and especially speeding and the associated, whether it's racing or the different activities that occur on our roads that are literally, unfortunately, they are killing people in our streets. And we absolutely have to do more. And so we want to begin a conversation today with our community. And also, we're wonderfully joined by our city councilors to just see what we can do for pedestrian and vehicle safety in our city that is bigger and stronger than we've tried before, because the current model coming out of the pandemic is just not working. And so we've got to do more. We know that. And we're going to talk about a major idea to deal with that today. Now, we're going to have lots of speakers too, so let me just let you know that this is such an important issue. There's a lot of folks who want to share their perspective on it. And so I just ask in advance you to bear with us because we have like 10 speakers almost. But each of them has a very important aspect and story to tell with respect to these issues. And so we'll hear them out, and then of course, we'll take questions at the end. But let me begin, I think, by just saying that, excessive speeding is one of the biggest threats to road users across our city. And we know that this has been happening all over the country post-pandemic, but it's also happening here. And those of us who live here also know this was an issue before the pandemic, and it has only gotten worse. And so for us, it has also led to far too many tragedies. And we know that the headlines, it is literally almost every day that the headline in the paper, and not to give the Journal free press, but these are the headlines that we see. This is just like in the last month, and of course our rankings being number one. So I believe we don't have a lot of choices left in terms of tactical operations, right? Having APD stand out here with speed guns for a week is not going to make a difference. Unfortunately, we even timed the lights on lead and cold, and it hasn't made that much of a difference. I think it's certainly better, but it still isn't doing the job. And we also know that we can spend 10 years rebuilding every road in the city and spend $500 million doing that. That also is not going to make a fast enough difference in a short amount of time. So we've got to have something in the meantime that will make a difference. And so for us, we don't have to be stuck in this place while we continue to just wait and wait. And we've got to wake up to the fact that we're tired of seeing our loved ones' names and our neighbors' names in the paper or in our conversations because they have been hurt or killed in reckless tragedies on our streets. So for us, we began a discussion on this actually about 2 years ago with respect to this program called Vision Zero. Some of you have heard of this, most of you haven't. It's a national pedestrian safety program to make all our streets safer. And we just last month polished up and finished up our action plan. But one of the big recommendations to reduce roadway fatalities coming out of this is to explore automated speed enforcement through an equity lens. And so I want to talk about this program and sort of the idea behind it, and also let you know what we plan on doing next. We've got some city councilors here today who are going to speak, and they've been working with this team and with our police department and with community members on a speeding and racing task force. So I want to thank them for their extra effort in their work on this program. And this task force has been diving into this concept, trying to understand what we should do, and also inviting our community to weigh in. And all of us agree that speeding and racing is out of control around the country and right here at home. And when I know, even when I meet with our officers, it's always like, well, why can't we do more? We've got our commander of traffic here who's going to speak to this. But this is such a big problem. You cannot solve it, again, by just deploying officers for a couple of weeks in different areas. We don't have the officers to do that, and it's such a big problem. Obviously, they have to take care of responding to things like 911 calls. So while we can do it sporadically, it's by no means a solution after a couple of weeks. Now, the idea of automated speed enforcement is, of course, to free up our officers to do what they need to do, but to also have legitimate enforcement of our speed laws. I mean, the bottom line is you're not supposed to be speeding. We all know, you know, we go a couple of miles over, 5 miles here and there. Sometimes we get speeding tickets. I'm no different. But that's not what is killing people, right? What is killing people is people racing and going 20 plus over. And when you combine that, obviously, with drugs and alcohol, it even gets more dangerous. So let me explain what this idea is so far and also what it's not. And I'll preface this. This is the beginning of a conversation. This conversation might not lead anywhere. It's really going to be up to City Council at the end of the day. But we're going to see and we're going to talk about how this might work. And we're going to take lots of public input in the process. So the basic idea is that we'd have cameras that are mobile. So some people call these speed vans, but sometimes they're just a trailer and they're on wheels. But a very important point is that they move. So we can move them to different areas of the city, or they can stay in the same place for a long time. But we can adjust based on what's happening in the community and what's happening with speeding. And this is not red light cameras. I want to be clear. This is about speeding, not running red lights. And so obviously we all remember the vast history with red light cameras that I think had more to do with execution than the concept. But nonetheless, this is not about red light cameras. This is about speeding. And so for us, we believe there are some tenets that are emerging from the community discussions that seem to make sense. So we're thinking about things like phasing them in so people know about them. You might get a warning first. We're also trying to understand things like the threshold. So, you know, no one wants to get a speeding ticket for going 2 miles over the speed limit, right? So we're not going to do that. That's not the idea anyway. And we also know that these they would have to be civil citations. And so these are going to be basically like parking tickets. And so they'll be handled administratively through hearing officers and so forth. And so they are not criminal citations. Now, we do think there's ways to have an officer review each citation so that there is that look from an officer. And these are, again, just ideas that have come from the community that will flesh out, that may or may not appear down the road. We also know that there should be an appeal process, probably. So we're hearing about that. And so we can, again, accommodate that through a program that we can put together. And we're also interested in things like community service in lieu of even a fine. So there's lots of different ways to do this. I think the key is really to get the execution details right. I have spoken to the mayors of Santa Fe and Rio Rancho about their programs, which they have and also are being modified in this case in Santa Fe. And so we also know that we've got to really be concerned and considerate of equity issues. And so data-driven decision making about where technology is used, and also putting signage out. We'll probably just tell you where they are. And, you know, because the goal is to get people to stop speeding, right? So if you just do that because there's a sign out, that's fine. And so we're going to look at all of those kinds of things that can even serve as just a deterrent. So nothing has been purchased yet. There would obviously be an RFP process to determine, you know, what partners the city would use for this. There are a couple of firms that do this all over the country. But we do believe the call to action is at least to have a conversation about this. Let's have this conversation and let's see where it goes. And the goal here is not to penalize people. It's just to prevent speeding from happening in the first place. And it is also simply just to remind people, I mean, we don't want you to speed, but we all know it's against the law. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that when this problem is so big, we've got to do something about it. So with that, I want to bring up a number of folks, but I want to begin with an individual who can speak about the dangers of speeding firsthand and who has been a partner with Councilor Pena and the rest of the city councilors on our Speeding Has a Name campaign, which is all part of the efforts that we've got to do. But I think with that, he'll tell his story. But Ruben De La Pena, the cousin of Erica Chavez. Ruben, come on up.
Thank y'all. What I'm doing here today is we just want to bring awareness of the tragedy that speeding can cause. Be responsible behind the wheel of your vehicle. A car is a tool that can get us from point A to point B. If you know you have to be somewhere at a certain time, be wise and allow yourself time to make it there safely. Do not let your car become a deadly weapon by speeding. Don't be the cause that someone's father, mother, child or siblings don't make it home safe. Don't wait to be responsible when it's too late. And you or someone you love becomes your own tragedy. We owe it to each other to keep our families safe on the roads we share today. Be responsible now and not when it's too late, when you lose one of your loved ones. So that's what we're here today to try to bring awareness that a car can be a deadly weapon. So when you get behind that wheel, just think about what you're doing and take your time and be there safely. And that's all we're trying to do is bring awareness so you don't have to go through the same tragedy that we went through. So if we can save one person, that is a lot. So that's what we're here today. So I just want to thank y'all for being here today and helping us get this across. So I just want to thank y'all again.
Okay, and there are, as I mentioned, a couple of counselors who've been helping on this speeding racing task force. And I want to invite Councillor Bassan to come on up and share her perspective. Councillor.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. We have been working as a collaborative together to try to figure out a way to reduce speeding in Albuquerque. Constituents reach out daily complaining about the dangers, the noise, the frustrations that they have because people are speeding continuously throughout all areas of Albuquerque. Breaking the law should have consequences, and right now the consequences are tragic and there are people dying from these people that are speeding and breaking the rules of what we have as enforcement. Our APD officers are inundated right now with reducing crime and keeping us safe and trying to improve Albuquerque. So I am super excited to say that as far as I'm concerned, this conversation will absolutely lead to something that will work with the community so that we can put these automated speed enforcement contraptions or vans or trailers throughout the city, so that way the new consequence for breaking a law will be you get a fine or you get community service, so that we can send a message saying be safe, and if you choose to break the rules and break the law, then you will have to pay a consequence for that will ultimately and hopefully prevent the death of someone else in our community who was otherwise not intended to be taken too early. So I look forward to these conversations. I'm so excited that we're working as a council with the community, with the mayor, with APD. We're working together to make this better for Albuquerque and to finally do something and have action to support the pleas of our community saying, let's reduce speeding and the dangers it is causing. So thank you very much.
Okay, and one of our West Side councilors, Councillor Senna.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just want to say that I appreciate my fellow councilors. I know that Councillor Pena, Councillor Bassan, and Councillor Benton were all part of this task force that we originally started through Councillor Pena's leadership to really get the conversation going as to what speeding enforcement looks like. And the speed van or the automated speeding enforcement was one conversation and way as part of the Speeding Has a Name campaign as well. But really this looks at a means of civil enforcement. I want to stress that to our community, as I know that there has been some concerns, but I also want to state that through this automation process of applying our speeding ordinance and traffic regulations, it takes out a lot of this bias that may occur. I also want to state that this is an ongoing conversation that we're having with our community as to what this could look like in terms of enforcement. Councillor Bassan mentioned whether it's community service, whether it's these continued conversations, if it is a fine, again, a civil fine, but we're really looking for our community input as to what that would look like. We are applying data to this application as well. We're looking at high impact areas where the considerations of where these vans could be placed. We are right now along Lead and Cole, a street that has been infamous in terms of crashes due to speeding. We've been at vigils within cores. We've had press conferences along Montgomery, all areas of the city, and just stating that this is an issue throughout our city. And we are really making those considerations and applying data as to how we apply these bans. So I want to stress that, and really welcoming everyone to the table in this conversation of what enforcement could look like. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor, and also our chairwoman of our budget committee, Councillor Pena.
Mayor. Thank you. I mean, I think the councillor said it best, the mayor said it best. You know, this has just been a collaboration. We have had speeding as an issue in our districts, our collective districts, and we've been just trying to put our heads together. A small committee has met, but really all of the councillors on council have been very, very concerned about this issue, and really how do we become more proactive rather than reactive, right? You know, our law enforcement, we have only so many officers out there. They're doing the best job that they can. You know, they're increased the speeding tickets. We have an intersection in particular in my district, which is Unser and Tower, and unfortunately that's how I met the Chavez family, because they lost their daughter, mother, sister at an accident there on Unser and Tower, and it was really unfortunate, you know. So that really spurred this conversation about what do we do, and we wanted to bring awareness. So we started with the education campaign, the awareness campaign, and them really wanting to loan their daughter's name and her, you know, their family's tragedy to this, to bring that awareness to everyone, you know. And then of course the mayor, you know, working with APD, doing the enforcement. So we're really just working hard to figure out a way how to address this issue in the community. And this ordinance has come about some of the discussions that we've had in our meetings with the mayor and the rest of the council, just to really kind of say, hey, you know, what else can we do to be proactive? And I think this ordinance will go a long way. I'm not sure what the end result of it will be, but I think it's an important tool that we need to put forward. And so again, you know, I just want to thank the Chavez family, the mayor, all of the councilors on council. I know Councillor Benton couldn't be here today, and he was definitely part of the small working group to address this issue in our community. And I just want to end that, you know, this happened to Erica on September 12th of this past year, and since then, you know, just recently you all have heard of Father Graham, who passed away as well as a result of this type of careless driving. And then also at that same intersection, we lost Janelle, who was another mother of I think 4 children. And you know, so it's something that we have to put our collective heads together and get lots of input from the community. So thank you.
Okay, there's been a number of folks involved in this who, you know, are essentially our sort of policy folks behind how this might work, and also around the Vision Zero project. And so first, let me bring up one of our city policy attorneys, Jasmine Ruiz, to talk about some other factors we're going to consider.
Hi everyone, good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm excited to be working with such strong leadership, our mayor and our city councilors, on this policy that's really going to impact our community to make sure that we promote traffic safety and reduce speeding. On the legal side, I just want to say that this is a starting point. We're really looking at Vision Zero's extensive outreach over the last 2 years to make sure that this is data driven, that it takes equity factors into consideration, and also looking at what the New Mexico landscape is. What are other cities doing? What has worked? What have they done? So that when we look at what we're exploring, we're looking at something that's legally sound and that really takes into account the diverse community that we have. You know, for me, I know that what's important is making sure that we aren't criminalizing our community, making sure that this is solely a civil citation process, and offering other factors like the mayor and councilor talked about, to make sure that we can offer alternative ways of paying for these citations and making sure that it doesn't result in a bench warrant. So I'm excited to continue the conversation, to be part of this, and to provide a legal lens through equity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hasmin. And we also at the city, formulated a specific position essentially, or reformulated, to deal with pedestrian safety and Vision Zero issues. And so the woman who runs all of us at the city, including the Vision Zero plan that was recently readied, is here too. So Tara Reed, come on up.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. As the mayor mentioned, I work with our Vision Zero program, which is really a holistic traffic safety approach that acknowledges that all of the safety issues that we see in our community, whether it's for people who are driving or walking or riding their bike or riding a scooter, however folks are getting around, that they should be able to do that safely, and that we should have a system in place, a transportation system that allows them to do that. Okay, we'll keep going. As the mayor mentioned, a couple weeks ago we came out with our Vision Zero action plan, and we worked with our fellow city departments. We worked with some of the agency partners, and we worked with a lot of our community supporters and community activists to develop an action plan around traffic safety that kind of addressed this system problem that we have in our city. Automated speed enforcement is just one strategy in that action plan that allows us to address one of the most dangerous behaviors that we see in our city, which is speeding. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to address concerns that many of our communities have, and many of our most vulnerable communities have, about over-policing, by taking that element out of the enforcement and moving to a civil penalty as well, as opposed to a criminal penalty, which helps people move forward. People aren't losing their licenses and things like that. We've been working with local partners as well as some of our peer cities who are also doing this work and trying to understand how do we do traffic enforcement and how do we create traffic safety while also protecting our communities. In addition to these enforcement strategies, we're incorporating more traffic calming measures into our road projects, building streets that serve all users and encourage safer driving. And then in addition, as residents of Albuquerque, we can all help protect each other by committing to safe driving. And I really appreciated what Mr. De La Pena said. If we can all leave 5 minutes earlier when we need to go somewhere, and just take it a little slower when we're driving, that's a huge impact with a very little sacrifice on our own time. We all use the same roads to get around, even if our paths are different and the modes of transportation that we use are different, and so we all want to protect each other. And our Vision Zero program looks at all of that. And we're trying to, in addition to the Speeding Has a Name campaign, we're going to be launching some additional campaigns about just being safe in our community, getting around safely, acknowledging each other, right? Let's make eye contact with each other. Let's communicate when we're out on the roadways to keep each other safe. So I want to thank the councilors, I want to thank the mayor, I want to thank the leadership of our city for working on this effort, and I also want to thank all of our Vision Zero community partners and everyone who is doing this work and advocating in our community for safer streets. Thank you so much.
Okay, now we do have two more folks who I think are very important to hear from. And next up is our acting commander for our traffic and motors units, Commander Veers.
Thank you, Mayor. So from a traffic perspective within APD, the need for this program to help combat speeding issues is very important. Speeding and fatalities have grown quite a bit in Albuquerque over the past several years, and they can't be left unaddressed. And unfortunately, these speeding and fatalities are costing lives of family members and friends. Erica Chavez, who is a picture we see on the Speeding Has a Name campaign, her billboards are up, you see the signs throughout the city. Her life was taken, unfortunately, by somebody who was speeding. She was a mother, and her family, like many other families, have lost loved ones to senseless speeding. A third of all fatal crashes here in Albuquerque involve excessive speed as a factor. In 2019, there were 97 fatalities, and that's the highest it's been over the past decade. Pedestrian deaths have also increased 4 times since 2010. In other cities, officers are stationed at different hotspots throughout the city to target speeding, but I don't believe, and the city doesn't believe, this is the right approach for Albuquerque. We want our officers focused on violent crime, and we would be stretched too thin if we relied on the officers to just do increased speeding enforcement throughout the city. We also know from around the country that traffic stops have the highest incidence for tense and sometimes tragic confrontation between officers and civilians. It doesn't need to be that way, and that is something we want here. Automated enforcement can work to cut down on dangerous speeding, and officers do not have to be involved in that process directly. Also, when it comes to street racers, we've seen that when we increase presence in these hotspot areas, the drivers usually just disperse and recongregate in other areas of the city. We will continue to cite drivers who speed and street race, but this will allow us to have eyes on places we cannot always have police presence. And that's why this important project has come through the traffic division in the city, and we're working together to have a conversation about that.
Okay, well, I really appreciate everyone taking time to be here today, and it's just the beginning of a discussion. We'll let this pass us by here for just a second. So, the only other thing that I would add is that, we do know that where these are located, they tend to be very effective, right? So, we have been, and this is the introduction to our final speaker, on Lead and Coal, for example, Peter Boletto's here, Dr. Peter Boletto, and he's going to speak to his situation right here in this neighborhood as District 6 Coalition President. But I know we've studied this, right? We've put out the signs that tell you your speed. We synchronized all the lights. We reduced the speed. We can study it more. The reality is none of that has worked. So we also know that we've got to do something that is just straight up more effective. And also, we're tired of waiting around for a bunch of studies that are going to take 3 years. So that's also, I believe, why this particular location in front of Lead and Coal is important to be in front of and hear that perspective. So with that, Dr. Boletto.
Good morning and welcome. The overarching goal for District 6 is to make life better. And this program will make life better throughout D6, throughout the entire community. Some of the issues. Pedestrian and cyclist safety. You'll notice the white bikes in and around Lead and Coal. This is a serious matter. Property damage. I reference the northwest corner of the park. You will see a sign that's crashed and a pole that's gone. A violent collision has occurred again. And finally, quality of life, noise, air pollution. Art folks deserve better. The Failed Berry Art Program and Initiative has impacted the Lead and Coal corridor even more. The number of cars per day continues to grow. Speeding continues to be an issue. Mayor Keller was invited to speak before D6. Among many issues was the Lead Coal corridor. We asked him for support. He listened and he acted. Thank you, Mayor. The rollout of Vision Zero is appreciated and I believe has great promise. This program will reduce property damage, restore the quality of life, and will save lives. As the mayor referenced, occasionally government is slow to act. This program, this problem has been going on in excess of 10 years. Mayor Keller stepped up and did something. We appreciate it. D6 is behind this effort, and we have every reason to believe it'll be greatly successful. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council.
Okay, so I think with that, we'll take some general questions maybe that work out, and obviously it's up to the individuals if they want to speak individually with you, of course, too. So we'll open it up for questions.
Mayor, so is traffic violations that is currently as a criminal, the part of the criminal code?
So maybe Hasmin might want to actually field this, but there's a little bit of a history, right, where before, when red light cameras were tried, it was under criminal. There was a big dust up at the legislature, this and that. This is just going to be a civil, is what we're looking at, and it does require council action.
But when somebody gets a traffic ticket, that's criminal, doesn't it?
Who wants to articulate that?
Currently, if you're stopped for a speeding violation, it's a
Yeah. All right.
I have two questions. A timeline, when, so you had mentioned that council needs to take action. What would be the timeline of that action? That's question one.
Sure. So we'll see what the councilors have to say on it, but we'll be sending a placeholder down to start the conversation, and that'll go down this week. And then the clock will really be up to our councilors. Anything else you wanna add?
Okay. I think that as far as the task force that we've been working on is the 4 counselors that have been working with APD and with the mayor's office so far, the sooner the better. We want to make sure to do it right though. So I'm a big fan of always making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's first, but the research is being done. It has been done. So I think the mayor also said it best that we don't want to wait an eternity for more studies to come down. We need to see action now as we're having these consequences now, and we need to shift them. So I know that I'm not going to speak on behalf of all of the council, but I can't wait to see this happen sooner than later.
Can I throw out a question or two?
Yeah.
You said this was different than Albuquerque's one with red light camera program. In some ways, there is a similarity because those cameras also captured speed as well. How do you make sure you're not dishonoring Albuquerque voters who voted against that program in that particular election?
So this is a very different program. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is the need right now is around speeding, again, which is very different than the rationale for that program. So we're going to make sure that we're in order legally and budgetarily. I know there were some issues where what those funds were used for, and we're also going to run this through an equity lens. And so, Hasmin, if you want to reiterate some of those aspects.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I will. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for the space. So this particular program, again, only would enforce speeding. And what the previous cameras did was catch drivers going at an intersection and passing a red light. And in this particular sense, we want to make sure that through exploring a nuisance abatement process, it's 100% civil. So, and it would also offer other equity factors, like making sure that we're taking indigent community members into consideration, potentially a community service aspect to that. And of course, there's a concern for the city using this as a way to make money. That's not the case. Statutorily, we can't do that. There's a process, and really what we're looking at is safety. So the money is going to go to pay for the program, and we're looking at any money that's left over to look at improving the streets of our city.
How much will the program cost? Estimated.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
What do you estimate the program might cost?
That's a great question. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you can take it if you want. So there's many options, and so this is why there'll be an RFP for this. There's firms that do it, and there's different sharing models where like they pay for the speed trailer and so forth. So you can look at whether it's Rio Rancho or Santa Fe or other cities, but there's a wide range. But we do not think it will cost taxpayers that much. So the short story is these programs tend to be, you lease them basically. So there's not going to be a huge outlay that's going to be required because we don't actually usually own the trailers. I do just want to add too, the issues that I mentioned earlier are key distinctions between this and the red light program. advanced warning, hearing process, officer review, threshold levels. None of those existed in the other program. And so, for example, I got a red light camera thing, and it was like, I swear it was yellow. We all did that, right? That was a different program, and that company, I believe, got in trouble for actually trying to make money off of it. So we think this is really apples and oranges. And also the times have changed, and our administration's changed, state law has changed, and city council has changed. And so we've got a lot of layers of accountability to try and do this right.
Now, Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had speed bans back in 2006, just a couple of them.
I believe that is correct. I think we tried it with a couple, and obviously that was long before my time. I don't know, Commander, were you there for that? We could follow up with a little backstory on that, but I believe it was like tested for a short time with 2 vans. And again, it was over 15 years ago, so I don't know exactly what happened with that.
I don't have a lot of information on that, sir.
Yeah, so we could follow up with someone who's had a little more tenure. Not that 15 isn't enough, I mean, just say it.
Mayor, should your police department be writing more traffic tickets?
Well, it's really a question for the chief and the police department. I don't think we want politicians talking about how many or how less tickets we should have. But I know that our chief is very interested in doing what he can to contain speed in speeding and racing. And so for what that level should be, you'd have to check with them.
And I do have another question. As this progresses, I know this is the start to a conversation, but in the end, will voters be the ones to choose having a speed ban or not?
So the way the ordinances work is this right now is a city council issue, and city council is empowered with that responsibility to add to the civil code essentially a penalty. That's what this would be legally. And so right now it's up to city council.
How much would the fines be for these speed bans?
That's a great question. Another one, I think the red light camera fine, again, I'm saying I think because I don't remember exactly, I think it was like crazy. It was like $200 or something. So we don't know what this will be. This will be part of the discussion where you want to get it right so it has an enforcement effect. But, I don't want to repeat the kind of ridiculous frustration where you get like a $200 ticket and then a week later there's like a lien on your house. I mean, I feel like that's how the past red light program worked, and we don't want to do that.
You mentioned that obviously these vans can move around and stuff, so will it be a system like if someone is complaining on 311 that there are speeders near this school or speeders in this neighborhood, would y'all move them around based on complaints, or will y'all have set locations for these?
So we'll probably handle them the same way we do the cameras, the mobile cameras that we have. You see these pop-up cameras. And the way that works is basically there's some that are at the discretion of the APD, so they look at the data and the stats and they say, hey, we should put a camera here. There's another percentage that are allocated by community input. Those can come through city councilors, or they can just come from neighborhoods saying we have this issue here and we'll test it out there. That's the beautiful thing about having a move. So we would certainly take both factors into consideration.
Can I add something
Yeah,
to your
sure.
question, Francesca? Is that you had asked the question about issuing more citations. Well, absolutely. I think that's what the residents of the city of Albuquerque want. But for me, one of the issues I have is that when I talked about Tower and Unser, we really did focus on that area, and they issued a tremendous amount of more citations. But once the police officers couldn't be there, and the cost of having those police officers stationed in that area is really not cost effective for the taxpayers, right? So when they issued them, it didn't reduce the speeding in that intersection, unless you guys, you live right there. So it didn't reduce it. So we're really trying to figure out a way how to make sure that we do more enforcement, better enforcement. But one of the issues with the traffic citations now is really what we're talking about, as a woman of color, is that I don't want to see lots of our young men and women of color being criminalized for speeding, which a lot of teenagers did when they were young. So I'm really fearful of that. So that's one of my passions about just let's get the job done. Let's bring awareness, what we're trying to do. Let's do more enforcement, which the police department is doing. But then let's look outside of that and see how can we address the issue without criminalizing our youth, especially our youth of color. So thank you.
I also just wanted to add, in terms of your question for voters' input, I just want to add that as this is being introduced into council, we are going into July recess, and really, even though we're not meeting on council, we're still opening up. And as I stated before, everyone is welcome to the table to have this discussion as to what application of the speeding ordinance and this automated speed enforcement van could look like. So through this process, we're certainly opening our doors and having everyone come to the table to talk about that and what their input would be. So thank you.
I did have one more question.
Sure.
Just talking about the timeline, because y'all said sooner rather than later. Does that mean in the next few weeks, next few months? Can you be more specific about when drivers can expect to see these?
So this is great. I'll speak for a minute and then ask a counselor to step up on that. But there is a break in July, as Counselor Senna mentioned, but that's also a good time for input and iterating different details.
So just in dealing with publishing, just for our ordinance and meeting the timeline of our July recess, of course we could always call a special council meeting to vote on the ordinance, but I also still want to take time to do this right. I know and understand that summertime comes also more free time for especially our youth that may be engaging in speeding, so we are trying to also think of that process as well. But through the summer, it just opens up for more dialogue. Whether this is acted upon once we come back after our July recess, I think is really to the discretion of the rest of the council, but to also meet our publishing date for this ordinance as it's going to be introduced.
You're on the task force, right?
That's correct.
So you must have some idea how many problem areas there are. So how many of these mobile cameras would you need to start to actually make a difference?
I think we're still in the early phases of that conversation, but what I will say is that a lot of our speed trailers that APD has been deploying, they actually collect the data. So it's not just something that it's saying that we're speeding, but also it tracks high times as well. Specific times that these speed trailers or speed vans, whatever they may be, can be deployed to issue these civil citations. So I think that's still up for debate and conversation with our community, but overall we already have this data as to which road and specific times that we could actually be deploying this.
Okay, other questions? All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you again, everyone who came out today for this, and we're looking forward to a discussion about how to keep our streets safer. Thank you.